Welcome to All Power to the Developing, a podcast of the Eastside Institute, where social justice, human development, and community building come together. This is where you will meet activists, artists, teachers, scholars, helpers, and healers who are bringing creativity, hope, and possibility to individuals and communities all over the world. Welcome, everyone, to All Power to the Developing. We are so happy to have you here with us listening. This is your host, Desire Wandan, Des for short, and today we have a great episode, just like all of our other episodes. Our guest today is a historian, educator, and community builder whose work spans history, politics, and education. As the Dean of Lloyd International Honors College at UNC Greensboro, he has been instrumental in fostering interdisciplinary learning and global engagement. He is also one of the leaders behind Let's Learn, an initiative that challenges traditional approaches to education by centering curiosity, improvisation, and accessibility. Today, we're diving into a conversation about reimagining education, how creativity, play, and community engagement can transform the way we learn. Welcoming to All Power to the Developing, Dr. Omar Ali. How are you doing, Omar?
Thank you so much for having me, Des. I really appreciate it.
Yes. And there's some fire trucks in the back because when Omar comes around, it is heating up. Please excuse that. I am in Brooklyn, New York, so there's a lot of activity on the streets. Very, very busy here. But we are so happy to have you here, Dr. Omar Ali. Let's kind of jump into it. Let's go to Let's Learn. What was the initial inspiration behind the creation of Let's Learn?
I mean, for me, I wanted to work with Dan Friedman, who's a longtime colleague and friend. And it was, in the pandemic, it was in 2021, and we were having conversations. We said, maybe we could create something that builds on the work of this development community, that builds on the experience of UX, which was an initiative led by Dr. Lenora Fulani, who served as dean for this free school, university courses, and its associate dean was actually Dr. Dan Friedman. And I had wanted to bring something to more people using, online platform through Zoom. And there were many people that were trying to develop some kinds of online presence. And I said, well, why don't we try this? Let's try it out. And so we came up with some courses, and it was a partnership between the Eastside Institute in New York City and Lloyd International Honors College of the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, where I serve as the dean, and I'm also a professor of history, and I teach about the global African diaspora. And the courses range from everything from, performing Arabic to, courses that involve people around the world, like Hibakusha, a conversation with a survivor of Hiroshima, to improv for everyone, to puppetry beyond the stage, to working with colleagues in India and in Europe and in Africa and Latin America. So it's truly global, and it really taps our international and global networks. And it's just been a joy.
What are some of the key principles or methodologies of Let's Learn? Like, what separates Let's Learn from maybe someone going to a traditional learning place, or maybe someone going to sign up for a workshop at a library or somewhere else? What are some of the key principles of Let's Learn that make Let's Learn, that really make Let's Learn, Let's Learn?
Yeah, I think that the motto comes from, which really describes what we do. I think, to your point about methodology, which is something that my father used to say, which is that everyone has something to teach, everyone has something to learn. And it's that in that spirit that I think what makes us a little different is that we are more playful with knowledge. We see ourselves as co-creators. While some people might have more expertise and knowledge about some areas, the spirit of it is that we're doing this together. and there's no grades, and it's really about people building a sense of community, whether it's, here in the United States or overseas, but really building bridges with different people around shared topics. And the I think the thing that I love most about it is that it's a regular series of offerings, and that anyone with internet access can join in. So, public libraries are beautiful spaces, but you have to be physically there. And while there's more and more offerings online, I think it's the consistency, the playfulness, the openness, the range of courses that we offer, touching on the humanities, the natural sciences, the social sciences, arts, and we bring in people who have knowledge from their lived experiences. Some hold PhDs, others hold no PhDs. In some ways, it's really true. Everyone has something to learn, and everyone has something to teach. And so that's a little bit of how we do things.
Nice. Can you speak to that a little bit more about the teacher or the facilitator, you having kind of that spectrum of people who are so-called credited or have degrees, and then others who don't necessarily have that accreditation but still
Yeah.
have something to offer and teach? I think, in a
Mhm.
world where everything is kind of based off merit and accreditation, that allows you to be able to be a facilitator, be able to teach, you're kind of opening that up and saying
Right.
these people still have something to offer, even
Yeah.
though they're not credited or have this over here that's a so-called requirement in other places.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think that the kind of experience that people have, whether it's cooking food for their family or their community, can be translated and be shared with broader audiences. And people have their own traditions, and those traditions are very deep and rich. And why not share is kind of our way of thinking about it. And so we have people who have, hyper specialization, whether it's running a mass spectrometer for a university research lab, or, having somebody who's read deeply in one area of, of philosophy, for instance. But then there's also just practical philosophy and doing things in the spirit of wanting to share and also to ask questions. So I think that what we try to do is blur the lines between sort of the hierarchies that are created in our society and elevate voices that otherwise don't get sort of acknowledged for the kind of organic knowledge production that they've been part of, and creativity, and and in some ways place everyone on the same level, if you will. And so that's the spirit of what we try to do, and it's very much based on, I think it's very much based about how do you create environments where everyone can grow and develop. So, the name of your podcast, we really want to live that. We want to give all power to the developing, that we are all developing. And one of the reasons why I continue to teach is because I truly am learning as a result of teaching and being in conversation with my students or just colleagues or just people in the community. So if we stay open, we can continue to learn and develop. And you might have taught the same thing many times, but you see it in new ways because there's new people and you've grown also in your own life. So it's recognizing that fundamentally we have this unlimited capacity to grow and recognize opportunities and build positively off of them. That's how I understand development. And we want to give that to each other and relate to others as capable of developing and growing and having something to give. And and that's a beautiful thing.
Yes. And what you're describing, like you're describing some of the process, I'm thinking of we just kind of spoke of the facilitators and the teachers, but now I'm thinking about the environment it creates for the class takers or the people who register. I can
Mm.
imagine it's probably intergenerational. People are
Right.
coming from all different parts of the world, coming to learn together. And that creating that environment is a very unique environment in itself. Um, can
Absolutely.
you kind of share what you've kind of seen throughout your time doing this program, what you've kind of
Yeah.
seen through the participants of the of the, or some of the, has anyone shared things with you, or not so much testimonials, but just the feedback people have really given you over the years of conducting this?
I think one of the things is this intergenerational and also multi-ethnic, multinational sort of character that we try to cultivate in Let's Learn, which the full title is Let's Learn the World as Classroom. So we see the world as a classroom or as classroom. And so I'm, I think one of the things that I really love about what we do is that we we see that people are struggling with things in their own lives, emotionally, given the state of the world. And I think that this gives a space for people to kind of get out of their own heads and participate in something that's a more communal, cooperative, collective. And I think it's therapeutic. So at one level, it's learning new things, but another level, it's also, I think it creates people kind of a sense of intimacy, connection that is developmental, because I think that we can't separate our cognition from our emotionality. And so those things play into each other. And I think just wonderful ways. So people speak about, the impact that it has on them. I mean, one conversation was very touching to me was there was actually students from one of my classes that came to hear a survivor of Hiroshima, a gentleman who was who was up there in age, and he was sharing his experience. And one of the students, her name is Noelle, was just for days was really thinking about this and just thinking about the impact. And she's somebody who wants to go into healthcare and was thinking about all of the sort of the horror that happened as a result of that nuclear bomb, but also the the hope that he instilled so many years afterwards in giving hope to other people. And so it's just beautiful to see somebody who's like, in their late teens or early 20s connecting with somebody in their late 80s. And that, I think it enriches the lives of each of them. So I think it's on the personal level, and also on sort of more broader, it's, it's growthful and hopeful is how I think of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that, because people are impacting each other's experience in the participation of what they're doing. That's a really good example, of someone sharing their experience in Hiroshima, and that really impacting people, because you're hearing it live and in the flesh. I mean, not live and in the flesh, but on Zoom.
Yeah. On Zoom.
On
Yeah.
Zoom, which is something we
Exactly.
haven't spoke about either. The majority of these are conducted on Zoom.
Yes, yeah, the majority of them. We have done some where, like for instance, one of the things that I regularly do is take people into the Guilford Woods here in North Carolina, which was a launching point of the Underground Railroad. And so I've taken groups of people with camera, taking them through the woods. So people around the country and around the world, but mostly it was around the country, were zooming in while we were going through the woods, and I was talking to but mostly we do it strictly through Zoom. And we have a new partnership coming up with a colleague, Professor Leah Barlow at A&T, who is credited for the sensation on TikTok of basically creating these free classes. And she and I are in the same city. And so we connected, and we're going to do a series of conversation, one at her institution, North Carolina A&T University, which is a historically Black college, and my university here also in Greensboro, UNC Greensboro. And then the third conversation will be online. So we're kind of doing a hybrid there, but most of our classes are strictly through Zoom.
Nice. That's so both sides get a little bit of something there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think so.
definitely.
Yeah.
Before we go to a commercial break, you have been doing these for a while. What have been some of the classes that have emerged that have really excited you? Like, I know it's probably a little tough to choose. There's been so many, and of course, you like all of them. But what are some of the personal ones that really stick out to you, that you were so excited that, wow, this class is coming right here, or someone's offering this, or wow, this seems very interesting over here? What have been some
Yeah.
that really jumped out at you since the beginning when you started?
I think that for me, the the discussions we've had, so for instance, with Qazi Abdul Rahman about the great Bangla poets, for instance, opened a sort of a world to me. I'm South Asian on my father's side, but I didn't realize sort of the depth and richness of that poetry tradition in South Asia. And then also another one, which was led by a physicist, an astrophysicist, Nick, who's in Boston, and he was doing a class that combined physics and chemistry with cooking. And he did that together with actually one of my former students who's now in a PhD program in Georgia State in history and from India. And they did this interesting cooking, discussing science. It was wonderful. It was a really great mix.
Yeah, when you talk about that, the first thing I think of is the playfulness you were speaking of earlier, because you're taking something that's considered serious and physics, right? You said,
yeah, that's right.
and then you're combining that with cooking, something that's kind of taken serious too, but there is room for playfulness in it. That I think so. It's so interesting, the marriage of both, and how you were speaking of playfulness earlier.
Yeah, I'll just say one other thing about that, which is that was a great example of blurring sort of the lines around sort of disciplines, because we sometimes treat cooking over here and then science over there. But really the first chemists were people, playing around in the kitchen or around the fire and trying different things. So it's in some ways we're playing with these categories and mixing it up and seeing what we can create out of it. And so there's a lot of science in cooking, and I think there's a lot of sort of pleasure in doing science as well.
Yes. We're going to take a short commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to learn a lot more about Dr. Omar Ali, and we're going to get deeper into his story on All Power to the Developing. We'll be right back after a short little commercial break.
Hi, I'm Melissa Meyer, Associate Director of the Eastside Institute. Welcome to All Power to the Developing. I hope you're enjoying today's conversation. In each episode, we introduce you to some amazing performance activists, play revolutionaries, and developmentalists from around the world who talk to us about their creative grassroots efforts to build a better world. If you like what you hear, please follow and share the series. You can find us on Amazon, Spotify, and Podbean. We'd love to hear your comments and ideas. Like everything at the Institute, the growth of All Power to the Developing depends upon the people who create it and benefit from it. We hope you're one of them. Thanks for your support, and now back to our conversation.
On All Power to the Developing with Dr. Omar Ali. Now, Omar, we've talked a lot about let's learn, but you in yourself have such a amazing journey. What's fascinating about your background as an historian, as an educator, and you also were a reporter for the National Alliance newspaper. Your father is Pakistani. You have a mother from Peru. You have a doctorate from Columbia University. What inspired you to take this path in the first place?
I think I was really fortunate growing up with parents who were very curious and open. And I think that profoundly shaped my own sort of way of being in the world. And I also happen to have lived in multiple places. My father was a civil and structural engineer who took a number of overseas positions. So we were living in Africa for a number of years, North Africa, Algeria in particular, for about almost 4.5, 5 years, where I was exposed to sort of the Mediterranean world and North African cultures, and traveling to Europe since it's right there. And then also in the Middle East, we lived in the western part of the Arabian Peninsula for about 2.5, almost 3 years. And from each of these places, we would travel to different parts of the world. So it was a very rich upbringing in the sense of like being exposed to many different landscapes and stories and people and sounds and music and cuisines. And I didn't realize how special that was until much later. But the fact is that I think many people have very rich lives if you just start to look around and see the people that you're in contact with. And everybody has their own stories, right? And the story that I had really shaped my global understanding of everything. And so whenever I approach a topic, I was thinking about how does this fit into the larger world? How does it come out of the larger world? So I was very fortunate in that way. And I think that I went to school and I, like a lot of students, was kind of bored and annoyed at the ways in which school was conducted. And I sort of rebelled a bit. And I only discovered books when I was about 17, and I was like, wait, what? Why didn't anybody tell me about this? And I was like, my God, this is incredible. It's like, it's a time machine. You can travel across time and place and go different places. And I just started reading voraciously. And that's what got me interested in, pursuing more university. And I just discovered this whole other world through books. And so I just continue to just love to stretch and keep learning, like I think a lot of people, right?
That moment at 17 when you discovered the book sounded like a very pivotal moment. Were there other pivotal moments that shaped your work and your philosophy?
Yes, I actually think in working with my mentor as an undergraduate was a Ghanaian anthropologist named Maxwell Owusu, and having done field work with him in West Africa, mostly in Ghana, but also traveling in Benin and Togo,
Yeah.
I really began to appreciate something that he taught me, which is that if you want to understand the making of the modern world, you really have to understand Africa, African history, and the and people of African descent across the global diaspora, and not just in terms of the labor of Black people in the making of the Atlantic world, but in terms of the cultural contributions, the political contributions, the very notion of what it means to be free or be American is freedom. And that rests on its opposite, slavery, as the famous sociologist from Harvard, Orlando Patterson, talked about. And so understanding that culturally, economically, politically, culinarily, in terms of arts, in terms of music, there's so many ways in which Black people have shaped the Atlantic world, and actually my work also touches on the Indian Ocean world, and so for me it was that relationship with Professor Maxwell Owusu, and then a little bit later meeting Dr. Fulani, the nation's first woman, the nation's first African American to get on the ballot in all 50 states, and not just recognizing or being able to describe the problems in the world, the inequities, the injustices, especially as a result of the transatlantic slave trade, but the oppression that takes place under, industrial capitalism towards all people, really. And learning to do something about it, which was to build positively and learn that people can continue to develop and grow, and we can create organizations to help empower people. And so I think it was a combination of meeting Professor Owusu and then Dr. Fulani and others. But I think, we're all the products of the people around us. I mean, we're fortunate if we can meet somebody who can inspire us. And I'm continuously inspired by the people around me and keep learning from them. So, but there were key people in my life from early on, my parents, and then Owusu, then Dr. Fulani later on, Eric Foner oversaw my dissertation with Manning Marable at Columbia, to, partnerships, intellectual partnerships, my relationship with one of my dear colleagues here, Dr. Naja Chek, who's a professor of chemistry and biochemistry, where it's really helped me stretch in that area. And more of my work is actually now on the history of science and the intersection of the African diaspora. And so, we can keep growing by learning from each other. And so there's a lot of people.
Yeah. No, you named some amazing names already. And also when you're naming some of those names, I kind of feel a little bit of their energy through you. Like when you said Fulani, I kind of feel some of their energy through you and other names. So I could feel the influence more than you just saying it. So that's quite amazing. And I think that says a lot too, almost going back to the learning environment you guys are creating, and let's learn how people are going to be impacting each other, constantly impacting each other, and creating that similar inspiration for each other.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
How has your approach to education evolved over the years since when you first started
Yeah.
to now?
Well, it's interesting, right? So because I did pursue a conventional path of developing in terms of my education, going to, undergraduate and then graduate school, there was sort of there was a countervailing forces at play. There was sort of the traditional educational model is learning acquisition, and you learn stuff and you become a knower. And unfortunately, too many people in academia, and I think I fall prey to this, become know-it-alls at times. And I think that the people who've been very influential in terms of how I think about education are Lois Holzman, and also my partner in Let's Learn, Dan Friedman, who embody a kind of openness and attention to the environment. So for me, the shift was just from just learning stuff and then spewing it to, in some ways, being much more attentive to the environment in the classroom or any other space. Because I love to take students out of the classroom and go on little field trips, whether it's to the woods or to the museum or to the archives or to see a statue like on our campus and then talk there. But I've discovered that, less is more in terms of information, because you don't want to over-determine what is possible in the conversation. So I come prepared with some things, but you also want to let the conversation take us collectively into different places. So I think I've learned to be very open to possibilities in the classroom, and I think it's all improvisation.
And you kind of said it earlier in your response. How do you personally balance being a scholar, an administrator, but also an activist in education? Like, how do you personally balance that?
I don't know. I think that I just kind of do what I think is most important next and attend to the person who's in front of me. And I think that I don't overthink things, and I draw on other people's wisdom. So when I'm in a group meeting with my honors ensemble, there's about 10 of us, the professional staff, and then we also have undergraduate assistants and graduate students, who come to our meetings. I ask them, what do they think about a certain project or event that's coming up? And I really want to know, because I think that we have to trust each other, whether it's an undergraduate, work study student, or a colleague who's trained as an ethicist philosopher, that we all have things to give, and that it's my experience is it's always just sort of best to kind of go with what people want to do. And very few times have I ever said, I don't want to do something in terms of the work that I do as an administrator. And in the classroom, I mean, I go all directions. So I think it's about trusting and wanting of the people around you and who they are, their brilliance, their creativity. And by doing that, we all get smarter and we develop and we learn. So I think the way that I do that is by not trying to overly direct or impose my way. And in some ways, people end up creating all kinds of things. And mostly what I do is I cheerlead. I'm like, I literally have pom-poms in my desk in my office. And I that's what I'm mostly doing, is affirming, acknowledging, trying to shine a light on people's accomplishments, and people, we create all kinds of things. That's how I like to be, if you will, managed by my provost, is just to be left alone and just kind of do things and then come to them and talk things through. So I think the best management style is people who just support their people. I've literally said, if anything goes wrong, then just blame it on me, And so, I mean, this is, keep it simple. Then people are more willing to take intellectual, emotional, creative risks, and we should just keep cheering each other on.
Yeah, that's I think that's such a amazing way to look at things. You don't often get people who exist in that way. So the fact that you're providing that for all of these people, that leadership, that style of leadership, I think is amazing. And I'm excited for anyone who gets to experience that style of leadership. you know.
Oh, that's very kind.
Yeah, yeah.
It's joyful. It's much more emotionally fulfilling because you learn all kinds of things if you're paying attention.
What advice do you have for people that want to make a difference? It seems like from the beginning, you've been wanting to make a difference. You've been wanting to open things up. With your position, with who you are, I think you could have took the easy route of just being in academia, but it seems you really want to open it up and give to the world and create more options and create more avenues of learning. What advice do you have for other people that may want to do something similar? Maybe not in the realm of education, maybe somewhere different, but they want to create something different. They want to create an alternative to maybe a world that they don't fit in or a system they don't fit in. What advice or what words of encouragement or words of inspiration do you have for?
Well, I would just say that they should just start creating stuff. I mean, if you want to if they want to create an event and show artwork or give a talk on their favorite thing, set a date and a time and invite people to come and call me. I'm mostly willing to play with anybody because it's what a pleasure and honor to meet a fellow human being and get to know a little bit more about them. And I'm hoping that there's time that I can ask you some questions also about your own work. And, because I think that, you've given so much by having this podcast and asking people to talk about themselves. And I think that people should also get to know you. And I don't know if there have been podcasts where that happens, but I would love to ask you some questions as well.
Yeah. One day, if you get a podcast or there's any other thing that I could be a part of is sit on a panel, I would definitely love to be a part of that. That'd be definitely cool. And I have done 2 Let's Learn classes. I think I did Intro to Podcasting.
Yeah.
And I did Introduction to the History of Hip Hop, the revolutionary history of hip hop. Yeah. So maybe my 3rd class is coming in the future. Who knows?
Yeah. And what I loved about your classes, especially the first one, was very practical.
Yeah.
You were giving people tools to figure out how to develop their own creativity. And then I think that the history class, of course, is always enriching to hear the lesser known stories.
Yeah, I was very surprised by the response. I know it's very engaging, and I really created it to be extremely engaging and thought-provoking, but I still was taken back by the response of people saying they enjoyed it and you're going to do a new one. So it really kind of boosted me and reminded me like, oh, I know this stuff and I do this. I do
That's
this.
Right.
And I can imagine that feeling for others, maybe. I think as educators too, something I realized, there's a saying, everyone's an educator. Everyone has something to offer. And I think some people forget that they have something to offer. You may have been sewing for 20 years and it's like no one takes an interest in your sewing. So you feel, oh, it's just me doing this in the house. Yeah. No one really cares. But then you get 6 people on Zoom that want to learn this and you give it to them and they're so accepting and they say, wow, thank you for sharing that. And you say, wow, like people are interested in this. And
that's right.
I just can imagine that feeling for everyone, whether you want to do woodwork or whether you do literature or whether you want to create things out of glue or goo or you want to do visual art. There's an audience for you. There are people that want to listen and learn and share and create. And I think I really got that when I appeared on Let's Learn. So the future of Let's Learn is so bright. If people would like to check out Let's Learn, check out the website, see the future spring schedule, other things to offer, where can they do that, Omar?
They just go to letslearn.world. I mean, it's really that simple. It's www.letslearn.world. I mean, that's basically it. So, just go online and we revamped our website. And so you can just sign up very easily and come join us and invite a friend. I think it's super easy.
Yes. And if people would like to learn more about you and continue on a journey with you and your works with Let's Learn or even outside of Let's Learn, how could they do that?
They can just put in my name, literally Omar H. Ali, and, like different things pop up at my faculty and website comes up and has a little bit more about the different things that I'm involved in. So that's a way that they can do that.
Yes, yes. And thank you so much once again, Dr. Omar Ali, for appearing on All Power to the Developing. All Power to the Developing is available on all majority digital streaming platforms. Listen, like, comment, subscribe. You can write to us at podcast@eastsideinstitute.org. I repeat, that is podcast@eastsideinstitute.org. Write to us. Let us know what you loved about the episode. We would love to read your response at the end of an episode. Once again, this is All Power to Developing. This is your host, Desire Wandan, Des for short, and our guest, Dr. Omar Ali. Thank you so much for listening, and all power to the developing. Peace out.
Thanks.
All Power to the Developing was made possible in part by Growing Social Therapeutics, the Baylor Wolf Fund.